The Zakar Dominion was a name whispered in fear across the galaxy. An empire vast in both size and might, it had conquered countless planets, crushed civilizations, and left an indelible mark on the history of the cosmos. Led by the ruthless Empress Sarathra, the Dominion prided itself on its technological superiority and military might. Their warships, towering behemoths of destruction, could obliterate entire cities in the blink of an eye. Their soldiers were bred for one thing: conquest. They had no mercy, no compassion, only an unyielding desire for dominance. But now, the Zakar were turning their gaze toward Earth. The Zakar had long been aware of humanity's growth in the galaxy. Earth's influence, though small compared to the colossal reach of the Dominion, was undeniable. They had begun establishing alliances, sending diplomats to neighboring systems, and making their mark in trade and technology. For the first time in millennia, an empire like the Zakars found itself questioned, not by strength, but by diplomacy. The Zakar couldn't tolerate this, an entire galaxy bowing to their might, only to have a species as primitive as humans challenge them? Empress Sarathra could not allow this challenge to stand. To deal with Earth, she decided, they wouldn't send their vast fleets or ground troops. No, that would be beneath the Great Dominion. Instead, she chose something far more personal, a diplomatic envoy. If Earth had a spine, Sarathra would break it with a simple message: surrender, or face complete annihilation. The Zakar's ultimatum was transmitted across the stars to Earth. The message was simple and terrifying: Earth had one choice, to submit, or to be erased. They would surrender their autonomy, their resources, or they would be destroyed. No negotiations. No middle ground. It was a statement designed to crush any semblance of resistance before it could even form. The response from Earth's leaders was not one of fear, as the Zakar had expected, but of deliberation. They knew the odds. Against an empire like the Zakar, Earth stood no chance militarily. But Earth had something the Zakar had underestimated: humans had a unique gift for adapting. Over the centuries, Earth had faced extinction from natural disasters, wars, and countless threats. And yet, they had endured. Humanity's strength had always lain not in their ability to wield brute force, but in their ingenuity, their will to survive, and their capacity to outthink even the greatest adversaries. After careful consideration, the United Nations made a bold decision. They would not send a fleet to face the Zakar. Instead, they would send a diplomat. But not just any diplomat. Jack Carter was one of Earth's finest. A man whose mind had been honed in the art of negotiation, psychological warfare, and strategic subversion. A man who had brought warring factions to the table for peace when all seemed lost. A man who had outmaneuvered adversaries far greater than the Zakar. A man who would face the Zakar Dominion without firing a single shot. Jack Carter wasn't just a diplomat, he was a weapon. He had been trained by Earth's best minds, experts in psychology, diplomacy, and conflict resolution. He had spent his life learning how to read people, how to anticipate moves before they were made, and how to turn even the most hostile negotiations into opportunities. When Earth needed him most, Jack Carter was prepared to stand against the galaxy's most terrifying force, and not with guns, but with his mind. When Jack's shuttle entered the Zakar Dominion space, there was no grand fanfare. The shuttle was a simple vessel, starkly different from the monstrous warships that flanked the Dominion's fleet. It was a reminder to the Zakar of what they were about to face: not an army, not a fleet of warships, but a single human diplomat, representing an entire species. Earth, small in comparison, had chosen to send a message of defiance. And that message was this: we do not bow. Upon arrival at the Zakar capital, Jack was immediately escorted to the throne room where Empress Sarathra awaited him. She stood tall, exuding an air of cold authority, her eyes narrowing as Jack entered. Her black and gold regalia shimmered, a symbol of the Dominion's unyielding might. Beside her stood Captain Vrek, a towering figure whose mere presence sent waves of intimidation across the room. The Zakar had no use for subtlety, no need for pleasantries. To them, this meeting was already a formality. They had decided. The Zakar Dominion would take Earth by force, and if Jack Carter failed to comply with their demands, humanity would pay the price. Jack's arrival was a calculated statement. Unlike the Zakar, who believed power came from intimidation and brute force, Jack stood as a beacon of calm, collected resolve. He was not intimidated by their size, their strength, or their reputation. The Zakar's most terrifying attribute, their fearsome warlord Captain Vrek, stood before him, ready to rip him apart if necessary. Yet, Jack didn't flinch. He didn't tremble. Instead, he met their gaze with confidence, quiet, but powerful. The Zakar were used to fear. They thrived on it. It was a tool they had wielded to break civilizations, to bend planets to their will. But Jack didn't fear them. He understood something they didn't. Fear wasn't a weapon, it was a weakness. Empress Sarathra looked Jack over, her gaze as cold as the steel of her ships. "So, the humans send a diplomat," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you honestly believe that Earth can resist the Zakar? That you can stand against us, with your fragile little planet? You're nothing. Your race is nothing." Jack didn't respond immediately. He let her words hang in the air, as if considering them. Then, with a calm smile, he replied, "I don't need to stand against you, Empress. I simply need to make you see that you've made a mistake." His voice was steady, unshaken by her words. He wasn't boasting or threatening. He was simply stating a fact. The Zakar had underestimated Earth. Sarathra's eyes narrowed further, and Captain Vrek clenched his fists. He had no patience for games. "You think you can change the course of an empire's destiny with words? You think you can talk us into submission?" Jack met his gaze with the same unflinching confidence. "No. But I can make you question your own certainty. The Dominion's strength may have brought you victory after victory, but it's also left you blind to the things you can't control." Sarathra's laugh was sharp, cruel. "And what would that be? The one thing you can't destroy. The one thing your fleets cannot conquer." Jack's voice was calm, but there was power in it. Humanity's ability to adapt. To fight when it seems impossible. To rise when you think we're finished. Captain Vrek took a step forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over Jack. "Enough of this," he growled, his voice like gravel. "You're wasting my time." But Jack didn't back down. He stood tall, eyes locked on Vrek. "You're right, Captain. Time is something the Zakar may have too much of, but I don't. And Earth won't wait forever." His words were a challenge, but not one of aggression, just undeniable truth. The room fell silent. Sarathra's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and something else, uncertainty. For the first time, she began to feel the faintest hint of doubt creeping in. Jack Carter had not reacted as she expected. He hadn't cowered. He hadn't begged. Instead, he had met her challenge head-on and made her question everything she had ever believed about humanity. The Dominion's most feared empress, standing in her throne room, realized something: this human diplomat was not as insignificant as she had hoped. Perhaps, just perhaps, Earth had found a match in the Zakar Empire. Jack Carter's arrival on the Zakar capital was met with a cold reception. The Zakar Empire had no use for pleasantries, and the diplomatic tradition that humans held so dear was completely foreign to them. As soon as Jack entered the imperial chamber, Empress Sarathra and Captain Vrek's eyes scanned him with disdain. To them, he was a mere curiosity, a simple diplomat sent from a small planet with nothing more than words at his disposal. Their assumption was that Earth had finally realized its inferiority and was sending its best negotiator to beg for mercy. But what the Zakar didn't understand was that Jack wasn't there to beg. He wasn't even there to plead. He was there to take back control of a situation they believed was already decided. The Zakar were accustomed to brute force. Their military tactics were based on overwhelming strength, fear, and the undeniable certainty that nothing could stand against them. They believed that their reputation alone, built on centuries of conquest, was enough to break any resistance. They had never encountered a challenge like this before. Jack Carter was a human diplomat, but he wasn't afraid. He wasn't even slightly intimidated. He didn't flinch when Zarathra stared him down or when Captain Vrek made threatening gestures. He remained calm, as if they were two people sitting at a cafe discussing the weather. Zarathra wasted no time in asserting her superiority. She launched into an opening salvo of insults, dismissing humanity as insignificant. She ridiculed Earth's primitive technologies, their supposed inability to comprehend the true power of the Zakar Dominion. Your planet is a grain of sand, she sneered. And yet you think your fragile species can withstand the might of the Zakar? Captain Vrek, standing tall beside Zarathra, barked in agreement. The galaxy trembles before us. Your history is a story of conflict and chaos, and yet you think you can negotiate with us? His voice was like a thunderclap, shaking the air around them. You will bend, human. There's no escaping the fate we've set for you. Jack's expression didn't change. He stood straight, calm and composed, as though he were hearing this all for the first time. He didn't show fear, and that frustrated Zarathra more than anything else. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had expected a trembling human, begging for his planet's survival. But what she saw instead was a man who, in her eyes, shouldn't have been standing there at all. You misunderstand, Jack said simply, his tone still even. I'm not here to beg for my planet's survival. I'm here to tell you that you've miscalculated. Earth is not what you think it is. Zarathra scoffed. And what exactly is Earth, human? What could possibly make you think you can defy us? Jack tilted his head slightly. It's not about defying you. It's about showing you that strength doesn't always come in the form of military might or technology. You've conquered civilizations by force, yes, but you've overlooked the one thing that makes humans unpredictable. Vrek laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. Unpredictable? Your entire species is a blip, an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. We've crushed entire star systems. We've annihilated worlds. You're nothing more than a minor nuisance. Jack didn't react to the insult. Instead, he simply said, I'm not here to talk about strength in the way you see it. You see power in your weapons and your warships, but what you fail to understand is that humans win through resilience. Through our ability to adapt. And we don't fear you. Not in the way you think we should. Zarathra and Vrek exchanged looks, both clearly frustrated by Jack's calm, calculated demeanor. They were used to seeing fear, cringing, desperate beings pleading for their lives. But Jack wasn't afraid. He wasn't even rattled by their threats. That alone made him a puzzle they didn't know how to solve. Resilience? Zarathra spat, her eyes narrowing. What is resilience to a species that can barely keep its own world in order? You call it resilience, we call it stupidity. Jack's lips twitched in a faint smile. You've misunderstood. You think we resist because we're stubborn. You think we fight just because we have no other choice. But it's deeper than that. Our resilience comes from something you can't replicate. The human ability to survive, adapt, and overcome in the face of overwhelming odds, that's what makes us dangerous. Captain Vrek sneered. And what makes you think that's something we can't crush? The galaxy has already bent to our will, human. Your little planet is just one more conquest on our list. We'll wipe you out like we've wiped out countless others. Jack met his gaze directly. You may have wiped out others, but you're not wiping out humanity. You underestimate us. And that's where you're wrong. Zarathra leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. Underestimate you? You're no different from the countless species we've wiped out. Your arrogance blinds you, human. You don't know the weight of the empire you face. Jack nodded, a small, knowing smile on his face. I'm aware. But it's not the weight of your empire that matters. It's the cracks in your foundation. Your arrogance, your reliance on sheer power, those are weaknesses. You think you've crushed every species that's come before you, but they weren't like us. They didn't have the same fire that drives humans. Zarathra's expression darkened. You think this fire will save you? This spark? Your species is no match for the Zakar. Jack didn't back down. His eyes were steady. I don't need to match you in brute strength. I just need you to realize something. Your empire has made enemies across the galaxy. Even if you wipe Earth off the map, you'll never stop the next species from rising. You'll never stop the next group of humans from challenging your empire. Vrek's face twisted in rage. You speak of humanity like it's some grand force, a worthy adversary. It's laughable. You're all just a fleeting spark in the darkness. Jack's smile remained, a quiet understanding. You're wrong. We're not fleeting. We endure. That's why we've lasted. You've never had to face that before. You've never had to face humanity when we decide we won't back down. There was a long, tense silence. For the first time, Zarathra's confidence wavered. She had expected Jack to cower under her gaze, to beg for Earth's survival, but he wasn't doing that. Instead, he was making her question everything she had believed about humans. Jack's calm, controlled defiance was like a mirror, reflecting the cracks in the Dominion's facade, cracks they didn't want to acknowledge. Captain Vrek was growing impatient. His hand clenched around the hilt of his weapon, ready to draw it, ready to strike down the human. But Zarathra stopped him, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully as she regarded Jack. You speak with confidence, human. But it's all empty words. What will your resilience do against our power? Jack didn't flinch. It will show you that power is not always about what you can destroy. It's about what you can survive. Zarathra's jaw tightened. She hadn't expected to feel this uneasy. She had expected to intimidate, to crush this human diplomat under the weight of the Zakar Empire's might. Instead, she found herself questioning whether Earth had been underestimated after all. The tension in the room was palpable. Zarathra, the Empress of the Zakar Dominion, could not remember the last time someone had dared to speak to her like this. Humans had never been a concern to her, just another planet to be annexed in her empire's unrelenting expansion. Yet, Jack Carter, this unassuming diplomat, was doing something no one else had managed. He was getting under her skin. Jack had already made his intentions clear. He was not here to beg or to submit. His unwavering confidence, despite being in the heart of enemy territory, was both frustrating and fascinating to Zarathra. She could feel herself becoming intrigued, but she also knew better than to show it. The Zakar did not show weakness. They did not allow doubts to creep into their minds. The Dominion was built on certainty. On control. And Jack Carter was shattering that foundation piece by piece, using nothing but words. Her fingers drummed softly on the arm of her throne. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Captain Vrek, standing at attention beside her, was clearly growing impatient. His warlord's instincts were roaring at him to end this, to silence the human and remind him of the Zakar's might. But Zarathra's gaze remained fixed on Jack, her mind working. Enough games, human, Zarathra finally said, breaking the silence with a sharp edge to her voice. What is it that you truly think you can accomplish here? You speak of resilience and adaptation, but all I see is a weak species hiding behind false bravado. You can't even protect your own world. What will your resilience do against the power of the Zakar? Jack's eyes never left hers. He didn't flinch, didn't flounder for a response. He simply answered, resilience doesn't mean victory in every battle. It means survival. It means coming back stronger every time you try to destroy us. Zarathra's eyes narrowed, her cold demeanor faltering for a moment. She had expected Jack to grovel, to plead for mercy, to fall in line with the idea that the Zakar were the unstoppable force. Instead, Jack was flipping the script. And that infuriated her. You speak as though we are the ones who have something to fear, she sneered. Do you think that just because you survived in the past, you can survive us? Do you think Earth's meager history and insignificant existence will protect you from us? Jack took a step forward, his voice quiet but cutting. I think that you're too blinded by your own arrogance to see the bigger picture. Yes, the Zakar are powerful. But power without foresight is a weakness. Power without the ability to adapt is a disaster waiting to happen. You're looking at Earth as a threat, but you fail to see that your own arrogance is what's going to bring you down. Zarathra clenched her fists. The nerve of this human. She had seen entire civilizations bow before her, trembling before the might of the Zakar. Yet here was Jack Carter, standing before her, defying everything she knew to be true. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he said them. The way he believed them. "And what exactly are you planning to do?" she spat, her voice rising in frustration. "What strategy do you think you can use to stop the Dominion? You'll die here like the rest." Jack's expression didn't change. He didn't show fear, nor did he show anger. There was only an unwavering certainty in his eyes. "I'm not here to fight you with force. You can't be beaten at your own game. But you're wrong about one thing. We don't need to fight you with weapons to defeat you. We just need to make you realize that your empire is not invincible. And that's something humans excel at, making the impossible possible." Zarathra's lip curled into a sneer. "Impossible? You're deluded. The Zakar Dominion is eternal. We have conquered and crushed every race that has ever dared to challenge us. We are not afraid of your so-called resilience. We are not afraid of your hollow words." "Then you should be afraid," Jack replied flatly. "Because you've already lost. Not because of anything I've done, but because of everything you've overlooked." At that, Zarathra faltered for a moment, her gaze flickering to Captain Vrek. She could feel the pressure mounting in the air, the invisible crack in the Zakar's mighty armor that Jack was deliberately prying open. It wasn't the force of his words, but the inevitability behind them. Humans had survived against all odds for millennia. They had faced extinction time and time again and still managed to push forward. Even in the face of the Dominion's overwhelming power, there was something about humanity's spirit that made it impossible to wipe out completely. Zarathra's mind raced. What was it that Jack was trying to make her understand? It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about weapons. It wasn't even about Earth's survival. It was about the fact that humanity's will to survive could not be crushed, no matter how powerful the Empire. Her gaze turned cold again, though now there was a hint of uncertainty beneath the surface. "Enough. Your words will not change anything. You're just a man. A fleeting moment in the history of the universe." She stood from her throne, towering over Jack. "You're nothing." Jack didn't move. He didn't react to her height, her power, or her words. His voice, calm and unwavering, cut through the air like a blade. "That's where you're wrong. We are nothing. But we are also everything. That's why we've survived. Because in the end, we don't fight for power or glory. We fight for our place in the universe. And that's a fight you won't win." Captain Vrek growled, stepping forward again. "Enough of this," he bellowed, his hand reaching for his weapon. But Zarathra raised a hand, stopping him. "Let him speak," she said, her voice chilling. There was something in her eyes now, something she didn't want to admit. A flicker of doubt. Jack had struck a nerve. For all her power, all her dominion, she could not ignore the fact that humanity had faced adversity that would have broken any other species. And here it was again, standing before her, unyielding. "We will destroy Earth," Zarathra said, her voice low and dangerous. "And we will crush your kind just like every other species we've defeated." Jack didn't even blink. "You can destroy Earth. You can kill us all. But you will never defeat what we are. You will never defeat humanity." Zarathra was silent for a long moment. There were no grand gestures, no threats. The power of the Zakar had failed to intimidate this human. It had failed to break him. And in that silence, she began to realize the full weight of what she had underestimated. Earth wasn't just a threat because of its military potential. Earth was a threat because its people could not be broken. Jack Carter had shown her that in a way no fleet, no warlord, no weapon ever could. The Zakar might be able to destroy planets, but they couldn't destroy the spirit of a species that had learned to thrive in the face of impossible odds. Zarathra turned her gaze back to Jack, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her chest. The human was right. She hadn't just underestimated Earth. She had underestimated humanity's resilience. And for the first time, the Dominion's ironclad resolve wavered. The air was thick with tension as Jack stood in the center of the Grand Hall, unwavering and calm. Zarathra's cold eyes watched him, the weight of her authority pressing down on the room. Captain Vrek stood beside her, his anger barely contained. Every moment seemed to stretch into infinity, but Jack never flinched. The game had changed. This was no longer about whether or not Earth could survive the Zakar Dominion. It was about something much deeper. It was about power, yes, but not the kind the Zakar wielded with their weapons. The power Jack was speaking of was a different force altogether, the power of human determination, ingenuity, and resilience. Zarathra was no fool. She could feel the change in the air, the subtle shift that she could no longer ignore. The Zakar Empire had always been built on fear, on the perception that no one could stand against them. But now, in the face of Jack's words, she was starting to question that assumption. There was something about the human spirit that was more difficult to crush than she had anticipated. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about refusing to accept defeat. And for the first time, Zarathra found herself unsure of her own invincibility. "You talk of survival," Zarathra said, her voice cold but now laced with something deeper, a hint of uncertainty. "But survival alone doesn't win wars, human. Survival doesn't topple empires." Jack met her gaze without hesitation. "No. But survival is what allows us to fight another day. We're not just surviving, we're learning, adapting, and pushing forward. And that's the one thing the Zakar can't destroy. You can take 1,000 planets, wipe out entire civilizations, but you can't crush what makes us human." The quiet defiance in Jack's voice echoed in the hall, resonating with a clarity that made even Zarathra pause. She had expected him to collapse under the weight of her power, to break before the might of the Dominion. Instead, he was doing the unthinkable, making her question the very foundation of her empire. Captain Vrek, growing increasingly impatient, stepped forward with a snarl. "Enough of this. You think you can outsmart us with words? You think your flimsy spirit will stop the Zakar from tearing your planet apart? We've destroyed entire star systems with nothing but our fleet. Do you truly believe that this, human resolve will make a difference?" Jack didn't even look at Vrek, keeping his focus on Zarathra. "You see, that's your mistake. You believe that power is in the fleet, the ships, the weapons. But true power is in the ability to inspire others to fight, to endure. It's in the ability to overcome when everyone else has given up. That's the difference between us and you." The words stung, cutting through the facade of invincibility that the Zakar had carefully crafted over the years. Zarathra's expression remained impassive, but Jack could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. The Zakar had never faced a species that fought for something greater than their own survival. Humanity didn't just fight for their own lives, they fought for each other, for their families, for their future. That kind of unity, that kind of resolve, was not something the Zakar could comprehend. Zarathra's gaze hardened again, but there was something different about it. It was no longer the gaze of an omnipotent ruler but one of someone who was starting to see the cracks in her own empire. "Your words are meaningless," she said, trying to regain her composure. "You are still just a man. A single human being, who believes that resilience can stop an empire. You have nothing, Carter." Jack smiled, a subtle but knowing smile. "I don't need to be more than I am. That's the beauty of humanity. We don't need to be the strongest, the most powerful, or the most technologically advanced. We just need to be willing to fight when it matters. And that's something you can't destroy." Zarathra's eyes flickered for just a moment, as if weighing the truth in Jack's words. The Zakar had destroyed civilizations, yes, but they had never had to face a species like humanity, a species that, despite all odds, always found a way to come back, to rebuild, to resist. She had believed that Earth would crumble before her. But now, she was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength was not in their weapons or technology. It was in their ability to persist. Captain Vrek snarled again, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Enough with this nonsense. We should be crushing them, not listening to this foolishness. But Zarathra raised her hand, silencing him. She wasn't as certain as she had been. The human diplomat was challenging everything she thought she knew about strength, about power. And as much as she hated to admit it, she knew he was right. It wasn't just about brute force. The Zakar had never needed to rely on anything other than their overwhelming might. They had never had to truly consider the will of those they conquered. But now they were facing something different. "What are you trying to prove, Jack Carter?" Zarathra asked, her voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "Do you think your planet will be spared because of your words? Because of your defiance? You speak of resilience, but that won't save Earth. Not from us." Jack's voice was firm, his resolve unshaken. "I'm not asking you to spare Earth. I'm asking you to understand that your empire is built on fear, not respect. And that fear can only hold you up for so long. One day, it will falter. One day, your arrogance will be your undoing." For a moment, there was silence. The weight of Jack's words seemed to hang in the air, pressing down on Zarathra. She had never considered the possibility that the Zakar's dominance could be challenged, not by force, not by rebellion, but by the very thing that had driven humanity for millennia, the will to survive. Zarathra turned to Captain Vrek, her expression unreadable. The warlord's face twisted with frustration, but he said nothing. He had no patience for these philosophical games, no interest in Jack's rhetoric. All he wanted was to crush the human and move on. But Zarathra wasn't so sure anymore. "Leave us," Zarathra ordered. "All of you. I need to think." Captain Vrek shot Jack a final, venomous look before he turned and exited the room with his retinue. The chamber was now silent, save for the soft hum of the Zakar's machinery in the distance. Zarathra stood alone before Jack, her face unreadable. For the first time since the conversation began, Jack spoke in a softer tone. "You've been deceived, Empress. Your empire is strong, yes. But strength alone doesn't guarantee victory. It guarantees survival. But survival is not the same as winning." Zarathra remained silent, her eyes fixed on Jack. There was a moment of stillness before she spoke again. "You truly believe Earth can survive this?" she asked, her voice almost gentle, as if testing Jack's resolve. Jack nodded slowly. "Yes. I do." Zarathra studied him for a long time, her mind racing through the possibilities. She had spent so long building an empire based on dominance and control, on the belief that power alone could conquer anything. But now, standing before this human diplomat, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the Zakar had overlooked something. Something essential. Something humanity had that the Dominion could never understand. "You may be right, human," Zarathra said, her voice low. "Perhaps there's more to this than I thought."